Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and this is day 19 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be rabbit, and today is going to be a shoulders and arms training routine. And right now, I'm going to be taking you through the full strength training anatomy and explaining which muscles are involved during each of the shoulder and arm training exercises. Now let's get started. And now it is time for the main portion of the resistance training workout. And for it, we're going to pick 3 exercises. We want one exercise to emphasize the middle deltoid, one exercise to emphasize the biceps brachii, and one exercise to emphasize the long head of the triceps brachii. They are going to be performed as a tricep, meaning we're going to be performing all 3 exercises back to back to back with minimal rest in between, only 10 to 15 seconds before we take our usual break. With regard to the middle deltoid exercise, I'm going to be doing a seated dumbbell shoulder press. For the biceps brachii, I'm going to be doing a low pulley supinated cable curl with my shoulders behind my back and coming into shoulder flexion. And for the long head of the triceps brachii, I'm going to be doing a standing bent over overhead rope triceps extension. Now, let's get into the strength training anatomy and explain which muscles are going to be involved for each of the exercises. Let's start off with the seated dumbbell shoulder press. With all of the exercises, we want to maintain scapular retraction and depression in order to stabilize the scapular girdle. So when we are doing scapular retraction at the scapulocoastal joint, that's primarily going to be the rhomboids major and minor, as well as the middle fibers of the trapezius. We're also going to be getting some involvement from the superior and inferior fibers of the trapezius as well. And then for scapular depression, that's primarily going to be the inferior fibers of the trapezius, the latissimus dorsi, the pectoralis minor, and the inferior fibers of the serratus anterior. Then moving distally over at the glenohumeral joint, we are doing abduction, abduction in the coronal plane. So that means we are going to be emphasizing the middle deltoid, and we're also going to be training the supraspinatus. With regard to this exercise, because we are in lateral rotation as we are pressing, we're also going to be getting some involvement of the anterior deltoid, but most of the magic is going to be the middle deltoid. Then moving distally over to the elbow joint, we are doing elbow extension. Elbow extension, that's going to be the triceps brachii group. We're hitting all 3 heads, the medial, the long, and the lateral head. And we're also going to be getting some assistance from the anconeus muscle because it's a muscle that assists in elbow extension as well as helps to stabilize the elbow. Then for the second exercise, the low pulley supinated cable curl with elbows behind the back and the shoulder flexion. For this one right over here at the glenohumeral joint, we are doing shoulder flexion. So when we are doing shoulder flexion, that is primarily going to be the long head of the biceps brachii. We're also going to be hitting the anterior deltoid, and we're also going to be hitting the coracobrachialis and the clavicular portion of the pectoralis major. Then at the shoulder, we are moving distally from the shoulder down to the elbow. We are doing elbow flexion. Elbow flexion is going to be the biceps brachii, both the long and short head. And because we have a supinated grip, we're really going to be emphasizing the biceps brachii. And because we're doing the elbow or the shoulder flexion, we're really going to be emphasizing the long head of the biceps brachii. And we're also going to be hitting the brachioradialis and the brachialis as well. And to some extent, we're going to be getting some assistance from the pronator teres muscle. Then for the final exercise in the tricep, the bent over overhead rope tricep extension. For this one, we are focusing primarily on elbow extension. When we do elbow extension, what happens is we are going to be training the triceps brachii group. We're going to be hitting all 3. We're going to be hitting the medial head, the long head, and the lateral head. And for this one, we're primarily going to be emphasizing the long head of the triceps brachii because with the elbows up by the ears, the arms up overhead, what's going to happen is the long head crosses the shoulder and is responsible for shoulder extension. So we have to isometrically flex the shoulder in order to maintain that posture. So we're going to get a little bit more recruitment of the long head of the triceps brachii. And we're also going to be getting some assistance from the anconeus muscle as well because it helps to stabilize the elbow and assist in elbow extension. And while we were resting, let's discuss the second tricep. We are going to pick one exercise to focus on the posterior deltoid, one exercise that's going to emphasize the brachioradialis, and one exercise that is going to emphasize the medial head of the triceps brachii. With regard to the exercises for the posterior deltoid, I'm going to be doing a seated high pulley face pull with the fists to the ears. For the brachioradialis, I'm going to be doing a seated high pulley neutral grip rope curl with the fist to the ears. And for the medial head of the triceps brachii, I'm going to be doing a seated high pulley pronated grip tricep extension. Now, let's get into the strength training anatomy and explain which muscles are going to be involved for each of the exercises. When we are performing a seated high pulley face pull with the fist to the ears, at the scapulocoastal joint, we are focusing on scapular retraction and depression. So scapular retraction, that's primarily going to be your rhomboids major and minor, as well as the middle fiber of the trapezius. And we're also going to get the superior and inferior fibers of the trapezius as well. And then for scapular depression, that's primarily going to be the inferior fibers of the trapezius, the latissimus dorsi, the pectoralis minor, and the inferior fibers of the serratus anterior. Moving distally over at the glenohumeral joint, we are doing a combination of horizontal abduction with lateral rotation. So that is going to be the posterior deltoid, as well as the infraspinatus and the teres minor. And then moving over distally to the elbow joint, at the elbow joint, we are doing elbow flexion. So that is going to be the biceps brachii, both long and short head, as well as the brachioradialis, brachialis, and we're also going to be getting some assistance from the pronator teres. Then moving on to the next exercise, when we are performing a seated high pulley neutral grip rope curl, what we are going to be doing is with the fist to the ears, what we are going to be training is elbow flexion. So because we're training elbow flexion, that is primarily going to be the biceps brachii group, both the long and short head, as well as the brachioradialis and the brachialis. We're going to get some assistance also from the pronator teres, but because of the nature of the exercise with the neutral grip, we're primarily going to be targeting the brachioradialis with this exercise. And then for the third and final exercise, we are going to be performing the seated high pulley pronated grip tricep extension. For the seated high pulley pronated grip tricep extension at the elbow joint, we are doing elbow extension. So that is going to be primarily the triceps group. We're hitting all three heads, the medial, the long, and the lateral head. We're also going to be getting some assistance from the anconeus muscle because that's going to help to stabilize and extend the elbow. But most of the magic is going to happen at the medial head because we are doing it with a pronated grip, and we're not going to be isometrically training the shoulder extensors. And while we're resting, let's discuss the exercises in the third tricep. For this tricep, we want to pick one exercise to focus on the anterior deltoid, one exercise to emphasize the brachialis, and one exercise to emphasize the lateral head of the triceps brachii. For the anterior deltoid exercise, I'm going to be doing a standing strongman log press with a close parallel grip. For the brachialis exercise, I'm going to be doing a standing mid-pulley pronated curl to chin with the shoulders flexed to 90 degrees. And for the lateral head of the triceps brachii, I'm going to be performing a standing bent over high pulley supinated tricep extension with the shoulders flexed to 90 degrees. Now, let's get into the strength training anatomy and explain which muscles are going to be involved during each of these exercises. For the standing strongman log press with the close parallel grip, at the shoulder, we are doing glenohumeral flexion or shoulder flexion. When we're doing shoulder flexion, that's primarily going to be the anterior deltoid, the clavicular portion of the pectoralis major, the coracobrachialis, and the long head of the biceps brachii, because the long head of the biceps brachii crosses the shoulder anteriorly. Then at the elbow joint, we are doing elbow extension. Because we're doing elbow extension, that's going to be the triceps brachii. We're going to be hitting all three heads, the medial, the long, and the lateral head. We're also going to be getting some assistance from the anconeus muscle. Then for the second exercise, the standing mid-pulley pronated curl to chin with the shoulders flexed to 90 degrees, we're going to be working on elbow flexion. So elbow flexion, that's primarily going to be the biceps group, both the long and short head of the biceps brachii, also the brachioradialis, the brachialis, and we're going to be getting some assistance from the pronator teres. Because we are doing it with a pronated grip, we are really going to be emphasizing the brachialis for this exercise. And then for the third and final exercise, the standing bent over high pulley supinated grip tricep extension with the shoulders flexed to 90 degrees, we are emphasizing strictly elbow extension. Because we're doing elbow extension, that's going to be the triceps brachii group, both all three heads, the medial, the long, and the lateral head. We're also going to be getting some assistance from the anconeus muscle as well. But for this one, because we are doing the extension with a supinated grip, we're really going to be emphasizing the lateral head of the triceps brachii. That was just a tiny taste of what can be found in my members only section. If you enjoyed it, become a member for only $5 a month to get access to hundreds of member only videos.